Welcome to 10,000 Miles. Today's guest is Andrew Oxley, author of The Four Faces of Frustration and an executive coach at the Oxley Group. For more than 2 decades, Andrew has guided leaders and organizations through the challenges that stall progress, helping them unlock clarity, performance, and growth. His work blends sharp business strategy with deep human insight, making him a sought-after voice in the world of leadership development. I'm excited to dive into his story, his book, and the breakthroughs that he's helped achieve. So let's dive in. Please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Welcome, Andrew. How are you doing today?
Excellent, Vic. Glad to be here with you.
Thank you. Another episode of 10,000 Miles about to go into the books. I'm really excited to have you on and talk about, your company, your book, sort of your experience to date. Why don't you start off by introducing yourself to the audience?
Well, I am been working in the executive coaching space now for a little over 30 years. And I like to say, if you see enough of what works and what doesn't work, you don't have to be that bright to figure it out. And so that's what I've been doing for the last 30 years. I've had the pleasure of working with some fantastic companies and some fantastic individuals.
Where did it all start? Where did your professional journey begin?
Well, it began actually in engineering school. My entrepreneurial journey happened or started long before that. In high school, I sort of cut my teeth selling door to door, and I don't know that I want to do that these days. But back then, I realized I had a knack for sales and for entrepreneurship, and I enjoyed working for myself. And so I did a couple of different businesses in high school and college, and then after that, I actually got my degree in engineering, which I always say uniquely qualifies me for what I do today, which is a nice way of saying it. It doesn't really relate to executive coaching, except it gave me a process orientation and a framework for solving problems. And I went to work for Train Canada. I started my career in Toronto selling commercial air conditioning. And whenever I'm talking to a U.S. audience, they're like, oh, they need air conditioning in Canada? Like, we have a very intense summer for about 6 weeks, So Toronto was going through a building boom, and that allowed me to have some early commercial success.
That's great. We go through air conditioners here in Texas left and right. As a matter of fact, I was just comparing notes with a friend of mine in the Northeast. And I said, hey, Fred, how old is that unit you have outside? And he goes, I don't know. He goes, but they last 20 years. He just said like that. And I go, I've been in my house 18 years. I said, I've changed them twice. They seem to last about 10. But then we did the math. He's like, well, how many months do you have your air conditioning on? I go, 12.
Yeah, that's right.
And he said, no way. I said, listen, in December and January, it's a day here or a couple hours here and there.
Yeah.
But, pretty much from March through October, we're running the air conditioning here. So when we did the math, there's a reason mine last 10 and his last 20. It equaled out about the same thing. And I just replaced it, oddly enough, one of my units with a Train. So there you go. Full circle.
Yeah. And it was a great learning experience working up there. And I led a large sales team in Toronto. And one day I woke up and decided I wanted to do something different. And I actually picked up the Globe and Mail, which is the national newspaper in Canada. It's sort of like the Wall Street Journal, sort of, kind of. Okay. And in the bottom right-hand corner, there's this little quip called Your Morning Smile. And this particular morning, it was the problem with the rat race is even if you win, you're still a rat.
Yeah, totally.
And I remember looking at that, and I was shaving that morning and thinking, I'm just going to be a big rat. That's all I'm going to be. I don't want to be a rat. And I was operating under the assumption that the problem was my job. And I know you know this, Vic, like if you think the biggest problem is your job, when you change jobs, you actually take the biggest problem with you, which is yourself, right? Yep. And so I did leave that job. I immigrated to the U.S. I live near Atlanta now. I have a wife, 4 wonderful kids. So I'm glad that I was mistaken because it set me on the path I'm on today. But the genesis of my rationale was actually incorrect. The problem was not my job. It was the way I was approaching my work.
Amazing. When did you have that epiphany? Did it happen as you transitioned, or is it when you finally determined you were possibly going to stay a rat?
Yeah. It was
I love
after
that, by the way.
after I started my job or my new company in Atlanta, and I started to recreate many of the same challenges that I had experienced in Toronto. I'm like, wait a minute, I started this business to get away from all this stuff. And, luckily I was engaged with some really fantastic mentors, and a number of them pointed out that perhaps the problem was me. And the problem is always yourself, right? The problem is I'm not saying it's the entirety of the problem, but 99% of the time, the thing that we need to change is always available for consultation. And it's the person that we look at in the mirror every day.
Yep. Agreed. So was this the genesis of the Oxley Group?
It was. Yeah. It truly was. And I came down here, I had some really great luck with some clients early on: Coca-Cola, Turner Broadcasting, Progressive Insurance, Cartier. I had a real passion for what I was doing. And that passion connected, not just leadership development, but changing leaders' skill level so that they could accomplish more in less time and accomplish more outside of work. Because I often feel like if you use up all your creative passion and your drive at work, and there's nothing left at the end of the day for the people you truly love, then that's not, in my mind, success.
I don't recall if we talked about this earlier, but I'm a large proponent and supporter of executive coaching. Have on the receiving side, and then also in the organizations I led, I brought it and deployed it within my leadership teams. And we had a going in premise that it wasn't for broken people.
Right.
Coaching was to take, we applied the elite athlete mentality towards it. Hey, there's a reason when you look at the best athletes in the world, there are a myriad of coaches surrounding them on and off the field. It's to protect and continue to this elite performance, right? And to develop it. So if we go in it like that, people's mindsets are immediately shifted. And the coaching was super important. But the story I want to tell is when you talked about professional and personal, we had to set this guy up in a coaching program, and not only did it help him professionally, but we were at a holiday party, and his wife came up to me at the holiday party and said, I can't thank you enough for putting Brad into this coaching program. It's really transformed him. And I only thought she meant he got promoted, he was doing better. And I was like, wow, yeah, he's really stepped up at the company, and it's been an incredible ride, and he's really, become so much of a better leader. She goes, no, I'm talking about who he is at home. And my heart just was so full of gratitude, not only for her letting me know that, but for having had the opportunity to make an impact like that. And I wasn't the coach. I just recognized the opportunity to put him with the right person. So when you mention and say that coaching people gets professionally, it's 360 degrees. It's not only focused on turning knobs and widgets at your job, man. This is who you are. It's fantastic. What are some of the common things you see in helping leaders rise, or to recognize it's them, or, what are some of the themes you come across in your journey there?
Yeah. The common frustration, the common thing that people will say, is I just don't have any more time. It doesn't matter their level of experience or level in the organization. Everyone runs out of time at some point, right? Because it's a perishable commodity, and so we only have so much time in the day. We all have exactly the same amount of time, but we don't all get the same amount accomplished. And so I ran out of time at my company I worked on in Toronto. That was around the 100-hour mark. That was why I felt like a rat. That is not sustainable. The research actually shows that any hour you spend working above about 50 hours a week decreases the effectiveness of not just the 51st hour, but every hour preceding that as well. So, we might think, oh, I can do it. I'm superhuman, but you really can't. You're not, especially as you get into occupations and levels in the organization where you're paid for your creativity and and your thoughtfulness and your strategic ability to see solutions to problems, you're just not as good the more hours you work. So,
It's called the law
so
of diminishing returns, right?
yeah, and you're exactly right. And so everyone runs out of time. The question is why? Why do we run out
Okay.
of time? And so one of the concepts we teach with our clients is something called the ceiling of complexity.
Hmm.
And the ceiling of complexity is that place where we say those dreaded words. I have no more time. And years ago, we were working with a client, Progressive Insurance, and we realized that the ceiling of complexity was self-created. And the reason I say that is we were working across a great swath of geographic area. We had many people doing essentially the same job, but they ran out of time at different levels of results and productivity. And so we realized, well, if they're doing the same job and they run out of time at different levels of results, it has to be self-created, which begged the question then, well, what is it created by? And we came to the conclusion it's created by their skills, their behaviors, and their value set, what they believe is important, the belief system that underpins their actions. And so one of the things I would challenge your listeners to think about is if they don't have a lot of time, they're running out of time, and they'd like to accomplish more, you have to, and this is going back to your comment about executive coaching. Yep. Executive coaches, when they're at their best, they're the blind spot, locator, that they can locate the skill, the behavior, or the value set, the belief system that's actually, contributing to the very problem you're trying to solve. So Indeed. As leaders, we have to have somebody who can speak the truth to us with love.
Yeah, well, that's a for certain for sure. I've also found not only in my experience but in seeing others. I had a unique relationship with the coaching company that I'd brought into these companies. We would never cross the barriers of, hey, so and so is having this particular thing or this particular problem. But I did meet with the coaching team, and they would always ask me, "What's showing up? Like, are you seeing any shifts? Is there any show up? What's showing up? Is there a difference in mindset, approach, good, bad, or indifferent?" And I would say, you've used fictitious names, John and Mary. Hey, I noticed this approach with John. I see how he's engaging his people. I see he's got a little bit more headroom when it comes to dealing with stress, like going on and take it all in. Or, hey, here's where someone I see is particularly struggling. They wouldn't take that back and say, Vic told me this. It was tucked away, right? It was just tucked away quietly, just to have an awareness as to this could potentially be a blind spot. Or if I see something I think is a blind spot, maybe that's the cause of it showing up like this.
Right.
So it was kind of unique, and people really grew to love the trust that they had with their coach. And when you say it with love, that brought this out. This relationship's got to be, you can't be penetrated. It's got to be based on trust and transparency, and it's got to live. And people have to play full out, because if they're holding back or they're not admitting they're struggling. I've had so many people say, I'm working 70 hours a week and I'm doing great. No, you're not.
Yeah,
it's impossible. Right. You can't be. It's virtually impossible. Yeah. That's super interesting. How did you wind up getting such great logos? I'm interested in this journey about, hey, you have this epiphany, because the Cliff Notes are great. Coaching company, had an epiphany, coaching company, Coca-Cola, right? But we know doesn't come out of the box like that.
No.
How did you build that up?
Yeah, it looks really like the overnight success, right? You always hear about the overnight success, and so I'll tell you how one of the clients came about. I actually was being mentored by a gentleman by the name of Bob Proctor, who I was actually setting up monthly full day seminars in Atlanta for him. And I'd fly him in. He'd always fly first class. He'd fly in. And I would spend the month putting together 125 people who would sit in a room, and I paid him, a flat fee. And so whatever I could make above that was my profit. And so I was actually running around doing presentations to sales organizations all over the metropolitan Atlanta area. And unbeknownst to me, sitting in one of those workshops was a lady who was the assistant to the head of Progressive Insurance for Georgia. And so I get this call and say, "Hey, would you come and talk to Eric Neely? He's the head of Progressive Insurance in Georgia." I'm like, "Well, I'd love to, but how did you find me?" And she said, "Oh, I met you last night." And I told him about how good you were and how we needed to employ you. So I think, and Vic, you know this, it's amazing how lucky you get when you work hard. And I was working my butt off. I was making 3 to 4 presentations a day. I was driving, 200 to 300 miles a day. I was in front of groups, and it was if I didn't sell tickets to that seminar, I made nothing. So there was one time I had a bad month. I brought Bob in, and it cost me 10 grand in 1 month. I worked a month to lose 10 grand. I didn't do that twice.
Yeah, no kidding. Bob Proctor credits Think and Grow Rich.
Yep.
The Napoleon Hill book for changing his life. Do you have any insights to that?
Yeah, and then he wrote a book, You Were Born Rich. It was Bob's book, actually. But he actually, he has he passed away just last year. But he impacted a lot of people's lives. And what I took from working with Bob was big on the psychology side of leadership, but he didn't connect it. He was more around how to create the mindset for people to go do stuff. And so what we did, we married the mindset with the skill development.
Okay.
And put the two of them together. But, if your readers, your listeners have not read Think and Grow Rich, it is to this day one of my favorite books.
Strong.
And I read it about once every year or so. I'll go back and read it again.
I'm overdue. It's been about 5 years, but I've read it multiple times and it doesn't get old.
No.
It always feels current, like it just had a rewrite to me. It's very bizarre.
Yeah. There's another book I would recommend, which is As a Man Thinketh by James Allen.
Okay, I haven't read that one.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's like this thick, but it's a mile deep. Wow. And it is, so there's so many quotes that you could draw from that book. It's really amazing.
Next on the list for sure. It's good. So let's see. You started the Oxley Group. You've got, you're telling me you got lucky, but somebody told me today, if you're not telling it, you're not selling it. So it sounds like, I was like, oh, I haven't heard that one before, but that sounds like you're out there doing the reps, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Putting yourself in a position to be seen, to be recognized, to put your best foot and your best work forward. And you were able to build off that and continue to leverage it. Did you know you were going to be writing a book? Were you collecting stuff to write a book? Because, the 4 Faces of Frustration, it was a book you sent me. I enjoyed it thoroughly and I've got some good questions on it. But I don't mean to, to fast forward to that, but it's such a good, deep topic. I think we can talk quite a bit about it. Would you maybe explain the book to people and then come back and tell us the story about when you realized you were writing or had a book, or how it, like, I want the behind the scenes story for the listeners rather than just dump into the face of the book. We'll get there, but I know there's a story behind that book.
Yeah,
and
there is. Yeah. Well, so one of the things that I spent a lot of time, and we spend a lot of time at the company here, is trying to figure out how to explain complex things in a simple way. Because simple is more complicated to figure out than complicated. Complicated is easy. Anyone can write a big fat book, but writing a small book that explains something, or creating a model that explains things. And so, we're always looking for models that explain complex things. And human beings are incredibly complex. And when you put 2 people together, it doesn't double the complexity. It goes up geometrically, right? So you put 5 people, 10 people, 20 people. So we're always looking for these models. Well, so I had decided I was going to write this book, and I kept talking about writing the book. So anybody of your listeners who are thinking about writing a book, this will help them. And I'll never forget where I was. It was August the 10th. And I was sitting at my desk, and one of my key people was sitting with me. And I got a call from Mohawk Industries, who's a client of ours. And they said, will you come and speak at convention this year? And I spoke a lot for them. And they're like, yeah. And they said, hey, have you finished your book yet? Because we'd love for you to present it at convention. I said, that would be fantastic. I'd love to present it at convention. And they said, well, we're going to buy 500 copies. You can have a signing and everything. And I'm like, perfect. So I hung up the phone, and Don, who was sitting in front of me, said, you haven't written the book yet, have you? And I'm like, no. He said, have you started? I'm like, no. He's like, aren't you going to Europe in a month? I'm like, I am. So I called the publisher and I said, hey, when do you need the manuscript by? And they said September 30th. I said, well, I'm going to be gone for the last 2 weeks of September. So therefore, I have less than 30 days to write the book. And guess what? It's amazing that when you give yourself a deadline, you can get it done.
You can
and
hit
I did.
it.
I got the manuscript off.
Absolutely.
So that was the story how the book came about. Now, the concept of the book was something I've been working on for a really long time. And I've been using it in my consulting and my coaching practice for a really long time. So I knew the concept, but I hadn't written the book. And the book is written as a fable, because I think most business books are incredibly boring. And I wanted to write something that would sort of pull the reader in and entertain them while it instructed.
Yeah,
right?
Stories are the best communicators.
Yeah, they really are. So that's how the book came about.
Hey, just to cement your point in, I've written 2 books. My first book took 7 years. The second book took less than 4 months, and I probably could have knocked it out in half that time.
Right.
I had a day job, My next book will be done in 30 days. I've put the outline together. I have the topic. I'm securing some time as we change into the year. And that's, you just got to do it. And you're right. Nothing better than a deadline. A friend of mine called me last night, and I said, and he's moved back to the area. He's got a house that he was renovating, and he just stopped. He bought a house, a big property, like a small 100-acre ranch, and just decided to go out there and left his house in this half-done state and said, I'm too far for everything. It's time I finish the house. So we got an apartment here, and I said, hey, Tony, when's the house going to be done? He goes, when's the goal? Or when's it really going to be done? And he goes, the date I told the contractors is that I have to have Christmas dinner at home with my family. And that's the date I'm pushing towards. He goes, now between me and you and not the contractors, I'm expecting first quarter. But if I tell him first quarter, I won't be until the 4th of July. So, but I love setting dates. So let's jump into, explain to people what, how I imagine this theme of frustration in leadership came up. Can we talk about that for a little bit? Tell me how that sort of self-appeared.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think everybody's experienced frustration at some level in their life, whether it be with their job or a boss or an employee or spouse, kids. If you're in human relationships, you're going to have frustrations. It's just natural, right? And the challenge is that we recognize when we're frustrated. It's much harder to recognize when other people are frustrated. Now, some people are pretty easy. Some people aren't that easy to figure out. We were all taught when we were growing up the golden rule, right? Treat other people the way we would want to be treated. And I always say that's awesome in areas of morality and ethics. It's horrible in leadership or in human relationships because the presumption is that you're just like me, and you're probably not. Right. One of the funniest things I find with frontline leaders when they first get promoted, I'm like, are you frustrated by, are you frustrated by your people? And they always say, yeah. I'm like, why are you frustrated? They say, well, because I would never act the way that they do. And I'm like, and you got promoted to leadership. Do you think you were promoted to leadership because you're average, because you are normal? I'm not saying you're any better than them, and I'm not saying the behaviors you're expecting or experiencing from them are okay. But what I am saying is that it's your job to lead. It's your job to figure out, have reasonable expectation and move people in the direction of that goal. So the frustration then, and it's very predictable because what happens is we have conversations inside our head that we really should be having with the person we're talking to or should be talking to. And since the human mind can't tell the difference between what's real and what's imagined, and if you don't believe me, just pretend you're dragging your fingernails across a blackboard. If you remember blackboards,
yeah,
and
you'll get the chills.
People will have a bit. People are like, if they remember those, they'll have a physical reaction. Well, there's no blackboard and there's no nail or anything. So when I play the movie in my mind that I'm talking to an employee, but I don't talk to them, every time I replay that, my emotional intensity increases, and then I finally talk to them. And the emotional content is out of proportion for the event that actually caused me to have the conversation. So I need to recognize what I look like in frustration, and I need to recognize how other people correspondingly react when they're frustrated. Because probably when I have that conversation with an employee, even if I'm really skilled, it might be a little frustrating for them, because nobody really likes to upset or fall short of expectations, even though it
Yeah.
may look like they do.
Feedback is tough to receive. And, just to tag in on something here, and I realized this about myself, and I made this own change in my own life, and it's been, I don't know, maybe about 10 years. So I'm not a young guy. It took me a while to figure this out. One of the common things people say all the time is when they get disappointed in somebody's response or actions, they say, well, if I were them, I would do. That is a losing observation. Because you realize pretty quickly when the light bulb comes on, they're not me.
Right.
I'm not them. They process things differently. It's even interesting to watch my son operate. He's left-handed.
Mm-hmm.
Every tendency he has to move is in the opposite direction that I go. Where if I'm letting him drive on a road trip, he has a different response than I do. He's a good driver. He's going to hear this episode and go, wow, finally, tells me I'm a good driver. We just drove across country. He picked up almost half the duty. I mean, he was good. But people are different. And when you're out there and the first thing you say is, if it were me, I would have done this. You're always going to set yourself up for disappointment. So, and now when I hear that, I get that nails on the chalkboard.
Yeah.
Or if I'm about to say it, I rewind and retreat very quickly, because even after 10 years of self-correcting myself from what I think that's a poison statement, it's natural.
Yeah.
Sort of a natural tendency people have. So you have to learn that that's not going to serve you well. Retreat from that. Understand that people are different. And again, especially if you're in a leadership position, this works personally as well. Your spouse disappoints you. Your children don't do exactly what you want. Hey, man, I got 3 kids. I raised them all the same. They are so different. It wasn't my upbringing. They are 3 discrete and distinct humans having their own experience. But anyway, back to frustration in the book. The 4 faces of frustration, you've color-coded them.
Yes.
Can you walk us through what those are and what that means? And let's dive into that a little bit.
So first of all, I want to sort of differentiate between anger and frustration, right? Okay, everybody gets angry from time to time, right?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe Mother Teresa didn't, but most people get angry from time to time. I know I've been known to occasionally get angry. But 3 of the 4 faces transition through anger into a different face. But one of the faces sort of stays looking angry. And I actually have this face myself. My wife asked me one time, I thought I was hiding my emotion really well. And she said, why are you so angry? And I'm like, I'm not angry. And she's like, well, now you're angry that I told you were angry. And the humor of the situation caught up to us. And I started laughing, of course. But, so now, in the defense of what we call the red face, which is the angry face, they're not always angry. But they're passionate. They're passionate about anything they care about, which is a funny statement, I know. But sometimes they don't care, and they're like, "Do whatever you want. It doesn't matter to me." But if they have an opinion, expect to hear it loud and clear. And when they're frustrated, they look angry. They look like, God, why are we having this conversation again? Why is it not happening fast enough? They just want things now. In fact, they would have preferred them yesterday. So that's what we call the red face or the angry face. So in our book, if you look at that face, it's like the person looks like they're like about to pop a cork, Yeah. Now, everybody gets angry from time to time, but the other 3 faces transition. So one of the faces, we call them the yellow face, the optimist. They start telling you how everything's going to be fine. Like they got mad at you, but then they start trying to make up and like, it's going to be okay. I know you didn't mean it. It's going to be good. And they actually don't often resolve the problem. They just start trying to convince you that there really isn't a problem. So that's the optimist. And if you've ever met one of these people who's just a natural born salesperson, they're incredibly persuasive. They're like a little party in a box. They're a yellow. They're an optimist, The problem with being an optimist is we are disconnected from reality quite often. And we always think everything's going to work out. And sometimes it doesn't, and so, as dealing with that type of individual, we have to make sure they don't convince us that everything's fine when it's really not. So we might not realize that they were frustrated because they have actually moved past the emotion and now they're trying to tell you everything's wonderful. All right. So that's the yellow. The green is the biggest group in society. In fact, the longer an employee has been in a job, the more likely it is that they are a green, because greens are a little bit averse to change. They don't like conflict. They're incredibly loyal. And when they get frustrated, they may initially start trying to share their opinion, but usually somebody tries to convince them they're wrong, and so they just stop talking. So the face for the green is no emotion. Now, I was dealing with a green some years back, and I thought we were all in alignment because they stopped talking about the issue we were discussing, and I just assumed, well, if I had something to say, I'd say it. So clearly they've stopped talking, so they must agree. Not so with the green. They've just decided that there's no point in talking to you, so they're just going to be quiet now. And when you'll know you're talking to a green if at some point when it doesn't work out, they say, "I knew that wasn't going to work."
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And you're like, "Why didn't you say something?" And here's what they'll say: if you're really listening, they'll say, "I tried, but you wouldn't listen to me." And you're like, "When did you try?" See, because they don't communicate the way that a more forceful personality would. They have a tendency to be really great team players, very loyal. But they see the problems.
I'm going to come back to the green. I just want to put a marker out here for that because I've got a lot of questions for you on the green, but I want you to finish the last color.
Yeah, and the last one is the blue, which is the often referred to the opposite of the yellow, the pessimist, who see a problem everywhere. They have tons of questions. When they get frustrated, they start firing a million questions at people. What about this? What about this? What about this? What about this? This is how you know they're frustrated. And they're trying to slow the situation down by pointing out the problems associated with it that they feel like you're not paying any attention to. So, with the problem with someone when they get the reputation for being a pessimist, Vic, is that people stop listening to them.
Yeah.
And so, we always say if you're a blue and you see the problems, you have to frame the conversation through your intent rather than asking 50 questions and then saying, "I want this to work out." Say, "Look, Vic, I'd really like this idea to work out, but I see a couple of really big issues. Would this be a good time to talk about that?"
Yeah.
There's not 50 big issues. There's probably one or two big issues.
Absolutely.
So rather than allowing other people to frame your intent, frame your own intent before you start the conversation. Give people a lens to interpret the conversation through, rather than allowing them to create the lens based on what they think you're up to.
Boy, I have so much to say and so many questions. I don't know which one to pose first. I'm going to start with this one. I'm going to tell you a short story about a blue.
Okay.
There are a lot of blues out there.
Oh, yeah.
But I saw somebody pull a pretty interesting technique once. First of all, self-awareness is a gift.
Yes,
if you're lucky enough to get it and have a hunger for it, I think it's the greatest journey you could ever be on. Because, you can't, in some cases, you can't change the world. In a lot of cases, you can't. But you can change yourself. And if you can change one person and everybody did that, wow, the world's going to change. So you start small. And I saw a blue, and this hit me when I was reading this. Develop a strategy to turn the blue into a perceived green, but the person was always a blue.
Mm-hmm.
And what this person did was they would come on calls, and they were in compliance and regulatory area of technology. And this person would come on and say, "I'm a professional worrier. I get paid to worry. So I'm going to speak incredibly pessimistic on this phone call, and I'm going to shoot holes in everything you say and everything you want to do, because I'm worried not in these words, but I'm worried that the most far out of bounds things are going to happen. But that's why people like me." And I'm saying, nobody likes you for that. I'm thinking to myself, nobody likes you for that. And when I was reading your book and I got to this blue section and you were describing the pessimist as you did, and I just said to myself, that's this person. But interestingly enough, this person tried to create some light out of that, but had no desire really to change, and actually believed that they were getting the most out of themselves in their position by letting people know up front that I have really bad behavior, but people pay me to have bad behavior. Have you ever come across anything like that in your career or in your experience?
Yeah, I think Marshall Goldsmith called this the success myth. That
Okay.
if as we get more successful, we start to believe that we're successful because of who we are,
Oh,
and you know. So one of the things that executive coaching does, it helps individuals separate the things you are successful because of from the things you're successful in spite of. I was coaching someone recently, had a lot of blue in his behavioral style, and a lot of red, actually. Both of those colors, and he uh, he was he's a professional negotiator,
okay.
and I was in my introductory session with him, and he kept arguing with me, and I finally looked at him and I said, "Hey, you don't listen well, do you?" And he said, "I am listening." I'm like, "You're clearly not. You just stopped me in the middle of my sentence." And he said, and he stopped him up short and he said, "You really don't think I listen well?" I said, "No, I don't think you listen well at all. I think you're a horrible listener." And he said, and I said, "You're argumentative on top of that." He said, "I'm not argumentative." I'm like, "You're just arguing with me now." So now, if I had tried to give him feedback the way you would give it to like a yellow or a green, that if I'd given it yellow or green that feedback, that would have gone over like a lead balloon.
Yeah.
But with him, he needed it square between the eyes and he did it very forcefully. And I said to him at the end, I said, "Did you like the way I just gave you feedback?" He said, "Yeah, just tell me." I'm
Yeah.
like, "That's awesome. That's the way you want feedback." When you ask most people how they want feedback, they say, "Just tell me." That is a bold-faced lie. They do not want it. They want it the way they want it. What they don't
Yeah.
know is what the way that is. Now, reds and blues, you can pretty much tell them. You better, if it's a blue, you better tell them with facts. But
Yeah.
a red, you can be as combative as you want with a red. They like it combative. But the other behavioral styles don't like it that way.
It
But they'll
makes their
tell you they do.
combative nature feel acceptable if they
Yeah.
receive it back. It's like it's the grounds of which they engage.
Yeah, exactly. So, so the challenge is if you're a red and you are successful because you're a hard driving, I'm never satisfied. There will come a point where the only people you have around you are people who are just like you. They see the world exactly the way you do. And you can't build a high performance team because there's nobody who's actually in the details. There's nobody who's building the team. There's nobody who's willing to do the detail work. Everybody wants to be a chief.
Totally.
And so we have to learn how to not become someone we're not, but flex enough where I can build the relationship with people that are different than me.
And I love this. I love it. And I'm chomping at the bit to talk to you about the greens. There are so many greens out there.
Oh, yeah.
And the bigger companies you go in, the more they breed.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, when I do a lot of work with a lot of big companies still today, and when I do work with people there who have been there 25, 30, 35, 40 years, my first thought is, hey, congratulations, because you don't hear a lot about that anymore. And the fact that you've been able to be successful inside this company, you've likely built a family or a life for yourself through this work. Congratulations. That's no small feat. Part of me also says, I have a little bit of empathy for you because that had to be really difficult. Sometimes when you get frustrated or you feel like you stop growing or you have this thirst for growth, it's just not going to be found where you are. You're going to need to make a move, find another opportunity. If you like change, that's okay for you. If you dislike change, you're not going to do it. But in these companies, as the bureaucracy machine gets bigger, as the complacency machine gets bigger, as the lack of perspective increases, and that comes from, and I don't mean this disparagingly toward anybody who has spent 25, 30, 35 years at a company, but what happens as a byproduct of that is largely that's the way we've always done it. That's the way we do it. We do it because And so you wind up with a company that has all these greens that don't say anything, that see the headlight and know it's a train, right? And the light in the end of the tunnel. They know it's a train, but they're like, I'm gonna get shot in the head if I tell them it's a train, because there's a yellow on the other side who's telling them that it's the sun, right?
Right. Yeah.
And that's the person everybody's following. And if I say it's not, and Andrew, this happened to me when I worked at a company. I was always the yellow, right? I'm a very energetic, positive guy, but I'm a factual guy.
Right.
People would say to me, somehow when you give me bad news, I still smile. I don't know how you do it. Because I come at you straight. Like, hey, this project 8 months long, going to go over by 8 months, and we're going to be over budget by $2 million. Okay, now that you're on the floor, let me tell you what happened, what we're doing to make sure it didn't happen again, and we go on. We came into a project at a company I worked for where I was brought on this this trip to discover some other company's technology. And the brass were very enamored by this company and how they operated. And there was a very large deal that was made literally over a handshake that ultimately got ironed out on paper for 9 figures plus. Okay. And when I had gotten back from that trip, the guy I reported to said, "You ready?" I said, "Ready for what?" And I said, "We got to do a feasibility. We got to look at this." I said, "This isn't going to work." I said, "That company operates in a completely different framework that we do." I said, "That is a cultural approach to technology and risk that we don't operate like that." The second our compliance department gets their arms around their controls or lack thereof, that thing's going to become our thing, and we're going to spend, hundreds of millions of dollars and not going to go anywhere. And I was, quote, told, "Hey man, I don't know what meeting you went to, but picture this. You're on a plane and everybody's jumping, and I just threw your parachute off the plane. You can either crash with the plane because the pilot jumped, or jump out and try to catch it." And I wound up navigating myself into a different yet important position before I ultimately left in another 2 years. But I wasn't going to become a green. I wasn't going to say, "I told you so." That company wound up spending $1 billion on a failed project, one with a B. And I was the guy that spoke up. I was the guy that aired caution, but everybody was following the guys who were brighter yellow than me and had no sense for, they had no red in them per se. Right. And what did that breed? More greens. It bred more greens, Andrew, because people watched the herd run to this initiative. They all knew it was a death march, that it wasn't going to happen, it wasn't going to work. Year over year over year, hundreds of millions keep getting dumped, dates getting pushed out, problems, all the things and more that I predicted happened. And everybody became so fearful to tell the Royal Highness that the project was never going to win and it was always going to be doomed, that greens they were created. In your perspective, does the culture of a company potentially create greens, and what needs to happen to break that cycle?
Yeah. Well, so greens, blues, reds, yellows, they tend to be attracted to work that is energizing for them. So in general, a lot of times in customer service groups, you'll see green blues or blue greens because it's repetitive work. And they don't mind the repetition. Reds and yellows get bored with repetitive work as a general rule. So people do get attracted to work that sort of aligns with what energizes them, of course, right? So part of the challenge we run into is I don't know if it's that the culture of the company creates the color, or it encourages people to stay who align with that type of view of the world.
Okay, now, fair enough.
I would say that, one of the most successful leaders I've ever seen is Trisha Griffiths at Progressive Insurance. A fabulous leader. She's grown that company. I mean, it was amazingly successful before she became CEO. She was the chief claims officer for years and became CEO of Progressive. Lots of stories about her, but she is actually a yellow green. And so you don't see a lot of yellow greens. As a general rule, the further you go up in leadership, you tend to see red, blue, and red yellows, those combinations. Why not green? Well, couple of reasons. First of all, greens are less comfortable with conflict. So they're actually really good at it. If they can learn a skill process of how to do it, they're good at it because people know they care. Like I said earlier, speak the truth with love. Well, that's what greens do. So if they can learn how to deal with conflict, they can be very effective leaders. But I was working within a company one time and I was trying to get this one green I knew would be a fabulous leader to apply for this leadership position. And she said, I'm not a leader. I'm like, you absolutely are a leader.
Okay.
And she said, no, I'm not a leader. I said, what does a leader do? And they're like, well, they tell people what to do and they're large and in charge. And I'm like, she was describing reds and yellows essentially.
Okay. Yeah.
And I'm like, no, that's just the way they lead. So one of the things as leaders that we need to do is we need to have a more diverse leadership team, and you need to find people from the green contingent who have leadership capacity and pour into them, because they will bring something to your leadership team that the other styles will not. They know where all the dead bodies are buried in the company. Yeah. Now the Reds do too, because they buried them. But the Greens, I mean, they know everything because people come and talk to them. And so the culture of the organization is driven, the old expression that the fish rots from the head, right? Yes. So the reason why Progressive grew as much as it did is it has been able to maintain an entrepreneurial culture while surpassing, many, many billions of dollars of annual revenue. I don't know how big they are now, 20, 30, 40 billion dollars of revenue. It's a massive organization, but they're still entrepreneurial in the way that they approach the marketplace.
That's tough to do. Yeah. Not everybody can do that. And there's often a disconnect from the top of the house to what's actually going on. I won't name names, but there are very big, well-known leaders that believe the company operates a certain way. And when they're out publicly talking about the company and how they operate and how the results have come to pass, and then the people that work there, and I'm not talking about a person, I'm talking about hundreds of people who work there. And if you put them all in a room, they would tell you this company doesn't operate like this at all. Yeah. Completely not. And if you're in highly regulated areas, it's very difficult to act entrepreneurial. And then sometimes it's weird. It's that when you get into these highly regulated businesses, much like the person I told you about who said, I'm a professional warrior, they almost feel defeated by the compliance and regulatory environment. Like, we can't do any of that. We're regulated by this. We're controlled by that. We got to have this certification. We got to do that. AI is never going to work for us. We're in a regulated industry, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, guys, you've got to reimagine the workspace and potential with where the world is and what the tools are and how people are going to need to be met and sort of what value you can always bring to them. And that's not going to be inside the box most of the time. It's going to be on the outside of the box or on the edges of the box. We could run laps on the four sort of characteristics and the four colors on people. When you work with people, is your goal to get them to understand who they are and leverage it? Is it to have empathy for people in other areas? Is it often to maybe change? I mean, what does that look like in your coaching style at your company?
Well, we have a little bit of a different approach to these. So the 4 Faces of Frustration is a model we use. We use a lot of different models. It's a very basic, simple model that explains a lot of things. It doesn't explain everything, but it gives you a window to start to see that the world is different for different people. And hopefully that helps create empathy. So it's a 3-step process that we use with people where you have to understand yourself first. Years ago, one of my mentors asked me, he said, what do you know about yourself? And I said, I thought it was a silly question, actually. I'm like, I think I know myself pretty well. And he said, I don't think you do. I don't think you know why you do the things you do and why you don't do things you know you should. And you know what? He was right. You mentioned earlier about self-awareness, right? The problem quite often is I was actually talking to someone, a senior executive, about this very morning. She was having trouble with another executive in the firm, and I asked her, I said, "Do you think he's aware?" And she said, "That's a good question. I don't know." And so a lot of times we just jump past self-awareness. That people know what they're doing. No, maybe they don't. Maybe they don't understand. They're not self-aware. Now, can you create self-awareness in a person? Well, yes, you can. It's not easy, right? But the question becomes are they coachable, first of all? And if, I was talking to an owner of a company just last week, and I asked her if somebody was coachable, and she said, "Well, what do you mean by that?" And I said, "Well, are they open-minded?" She said, "Yeah." And I said, "Did they change?" And she said, "Yeah." And I said, "Do they continue to change until results are achieved?" And she said, "No." I said, "Well, then they're not coachable." Now she said, "Well, it depends on what we're talking about." I'm like, "Okay, so they're coachable in some areas, but not others." I said, "So, what we sometimes do is we have this assumption that when we're coaching people, or when we're working with somebody, that they understand where they are. That's the self-awareness piece, right? And they're bought into where we're trying to get to. And all they need is a plan. And what I found is that's rarely true. Sometimes they're not excited about where we're going because we haven't really made it. There's nothing in it for them. They're not passionate about it. They're just like, I guess that's what you said. That's the goal. So that's the goal. So that's problematic to begin with. But the bigger issue is the starting point. No one, when you went on your road trip with your son, you would never have thought to pull up, the map and without knowing where you were starting from. But the good news is your phone knew where you were. That's right. But people don't know where they're starting from. So if I'm coaching someone, and even if we agreed on the destination, if I give them a plan, but they disagree with the starting point, they're not going to be very committed to my plan. And then I wonder why I have the same coaching conversations over and over and over again. It's like Groundhog Day for most people. We had this conversation last month. Well, at some point you got to stop and think, maybe the problem is that they disagree with the starting point. Even the most measurable occupation on earth, which is sales, you could have somebody who it's inarguable that their sales are in the tank, but they will disagree why.
Product's bad.
Yeah, it's the product.
Team's bad. Support's bad. Customers stink. Right. Yeah. All of these things. Yeah.
So we have to agree on the starting point to get started. Right. Yeah. So sometimes that's self-awareness, right? That they don't understand. Maybe they're making the problem external to themselves, which is what we started with. That's what I was doing when I thought I was going to become a rat. I thought the problem was the job, the company. Never occurred to me it was me until I recreated the same problem somewhere else. And then I had, luckily, I had bought into the idea of coaching. And I've had a coach now for over 30 years. It's been different coaches, different mentors, but I've always got one. I've got one right now. And, it's funny because, people say, "Well, why do you need a coach? You coach people." I'm like, well, how could I have any kind of congruence?
That's right.
If I didn't buy into the very thing, which I'm telling other people that they need.
Be like you selling Hoover vacuums and using a Dyson.
Yeah.
Right. It's like you gotta drink the Kool-Aid in which you sell it.
Absolutely.
I have a friend who's a coach as well. And he's always had a coach, through the entire journey. And it's something that I know from many coaches I've worked with. Coaches always have coaches.
Yeah.
Always do. And I go back to, even the best athletes still have coaches. And Those coaches are always still studying different things to help people. They need other perspectives on how to get their players better. COVID. Shift in leadership post-COVID.
Yeah.
Did you see different problems arise? Tell me about, without really painting the picture. When I say there was a shift in leadership after COVID, does that resonate with you? And if so, how do you describe it?
Oh my gosh. It was like, we microwave 10 years of change into 6 months.
We sure did.
And now all the changes were underway, Like leadership really hasn't changed, but the necessity to lead people properly is become more and more evident. And so I talk to leaders today and they're like, young people today, and I'm like, let's stop there. First of all, I'm pretty sure our parents said exactly the same thing about us. And they're like, well,
Yeah.
young people today are different. I'm like, they absolutely are. And some of it's healthy. Some of it is healthy and some of it's not healthy. So let's take the not healthy stuff and let's just put that over here for a minute. Let's talk about what is healthy. What is healthy is that they are willing to work hard for a mission. They will actually work harder for a mission than money. Now that wasn't true when I started my career. People are all about, I'm going to put in my time, I'm going to work hard, and I'm going to get an opportunity. Well, young people today have looked at that and said that's not true. You don't always, sometimes I've seen people who worked really hard and played by the rules, and then they got like downsized, outsized, right-sized. Yep. So they're far more focused on the now, okay, which can have an unhealthy component to it. But complaining about young people today is like complaining and yelling at the wind. Yes. The wind doesn't change, and I'm exhausted. So if I'm going to have a future as a leader, I need to learn how to lead differently. And the good news is that the principles of effective leadership have not changed. They're exactly the same. You got to connect with people. You got to understand where they are and where they want to get to. Telling them what they should want to do does not work with young people today. They're like, no, I don't want to do that. But the good news is that there are more highly motivated, highly industrious young people today who are incredibly technologically savvy. So, so I'll be talking to leaders and they're like, well, I can't find him. I'm like, how many do you need? And they're like, I got to find 3. I'm like, really? You live in Atlanta? Yeah. I'm pretty sure maybe we do have a generational issue, but you don't need to hire the generation. You just need to hire a few.
Yeah.
So let's not become a victim here, and let's focus on what we need to do differently.
So much behind that. This is often a topic of conversation amongst friends, colleagues, peers, everybody, about the difference or the cause of the difference in the generations.
Uh-huh.
And one of the things that we've talked about with young folks is, I hate even that term. It just makes me sound old, but
it does, doesn't it?
Yeah, with the younger generation is that things in the market has gotten so far out of reach. And so they talk about this lease and rental, economy that's coming our way. When my dad bought his first house, it was like his most prideful moment. Uh-huh. It happened. He couldn't believe it. He ultimately did run its course for 30 years. And when he did make the last payment, unfortunately, my mom had already passed away and he was sick with cancer. Mm. And so he lived for this American dream, per se. And he got to the end, and my brother handed him his paid off deed in a hospital bed and said, hey, you should be proud of yourself. You paid off your mortgage. That was a generational thing. The byproduct of that for me was screw it. Leverage, right? Live within my means, but like I could die at 63 like my mom did. I could die at 73 like my dad did. I need to have some more life experiences. Now, I do own a home. I've owned a number of homes. I had a vacation home at one point. We let it go because we never went there, but that's a whole other episode. But home ownership was still instilled in me in a way, mm-hmm. The work I was doing was catching up and in many cases outpacing the cost of homes. Today, man, I mean, my daughter and her husband, they did it all on their own, no help from us. Their first house was almost $700,000.
Wow.
And my son-in-law is a stud. This kid has been earning and getting promoted at the company he works for. He's an anomaly. He's not the average guy. Yeah. If you're a fireman, a school teacher, I take tradesmen out now because they're making $200 an hour. A handyman's $300 an hour, by the way. It's just because there's 2-hour minimum. No, sorry, it's 150 an hour, 2-hour minimum, and then 200 an hour after that. But skilled labor is on the rise, and all of these things are happening. But I wonder if the shift in attitudes watching us grind and work so hard, live with the frustration, get called on a Saturday or Sunday. I've been in technology for an outage and not be available for a whole weekend, be either in the office or in my back office in my house. And that grind and the stress and the wear and tear and all of that. I can only imagine they looked at that stuff, Andrew, and they went, not for me. First of all, that house $1 million now. What do I got to earn to get to do that? Whatever happened just to a good job and a life and a salary, even with 2 incomes, that's becoming out of reach. My dad's been a ball of mess for the first, 52 years of his life. And he only figured out in the last 9 that he's much more, he's figured out how to, not live with all that stress and continue to be successful in spite of it. I don't want my life to be like that. What do you think people think? Like, what do you think of these generational changes are? Is there more to it in your perspective, or is it just that times are different?
Yeah, you've identified a big part of it. And now the good news is, if you're a leader, is so, a lot of times it's hard to compete against the big companies. But this is one area that a small company and a small organization, when I say small, I mean, you can be small. I've got one client that's about, they're running just over about $1.5 billion. So I still consider them a small company because they're incredibly entrepreneurial.
Okay.
You can outplay the big boys here because you can create a culture that young people are attracted to. I had an employee some years back who worked for me, and he answered an email on Saturday, and he was very proud of this. He looked after something, and he came in and told me Monday morning. I said, "We don't do that here." And he said, "I thought you would be pleased that I looked after our client." I'm like, "No." I said, "What was your family doing on Saturday?" That's where you needed to be. Not working. I don't want you working on Saturday. Now, granted, it's not like I'm working in IT where there could be an outage.
Yeah, understood.
But I have the luxury of saying, look, nobody dies when we don't answer the phone.
Yeah.
Nothing bad happens. The further you progress up in leadership, there are times you have to work after hours. You have to work on the weekend. But I think what ends up happening to a lot of leaders is it starts to become, it feeds their ego that they need to be available. And if I'm not available, then maybe people will think I'm not necessary. So I think culturally, this actually helps small companies, because they can create a culture that young people thrive in and want to be part of. My daughter works for a company actually that has unlimited PTO. And I asked one of the people there, I'm like, so that's pretty cool. Like, they're like, we actually take less time off than if we actually had finite amounts of PTO.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting thing that when you give someone unlimited PTO, and they are the right employee, by the way, because if they're not the right employee, they're not going to be performing anyway.
Exactly.
Which is a different problem. When you give people unlimited PTO, they tend to become more responsible because they're like, so I'm not confined. So if I don't take my 14, 21 days this year, it's not like I can't, it's not like I lose them because I had unlimited PTO anyway. Whereas when you give people a finite amount, they'll max it out. And they're like, I got to take my vacation.
Reminds me of 2 stories. The first one, tied to the latter point you made. If you met my kids, they're all very fit. My son, as a matter of fact, he's like a machine. He's ripped, and they've grown up in their lives watching their mom go to the gym 6 days a week. But my mom enjoys herself. My wife enjoys herself. She's a great cook. We eat well. Our pantry is full of sweets and treats, full of it. We mostly throw them out because they expire or we haven't consumed them. But as kids, my kids had access to it, but never gorged on it, ever. A couple of cookies, maybe a small little bag of chips, all in extreme moderation. But we never had to set a limit, a chop it. When their friends would come over and they'd open the pantry and see that it looked like, the sweets and candy aisle in a supermarket, they'd be face down in this thing, and bags would be flying all over the place because it wasn't available.
Yeah.
The same thing probably with the unlimited PTO. With the right people,
Yeah.
with the right behaviors and right exposure, it doesn't become a big deal. The second story was I worked at Bear Stearns, great culture, great company, very unfortunate demise. And I went to working for JP Morgan Chase at the time. And I was in a new role, and I was part of a very big project to bring three companies together with a very particular area of the technology in the mortgage space. And I was wrapping up my Friday, and I was thinking of some report I needed to understand sort of how we were spending certain things on certain things. And I was getting ready to leave, like maybe 4:00 on Friday, and I saw this person outside of my office. And I said, "Hey, you got a minute? Yeah. Can you come in?" I said, "I'm trying to figure this out. I don't have all the data I need. Do you know how to get access to this data?" "Oh yeah, I absolutely do." And I said, "Hey, great. I would love you to get me a report that X, Y, Z," and I labeled it all out. And she said to me, "Hey, great. It'll be in your inbox tomorrow by noon." Tomorrow was Saturday.
Right.
And I said to her, hey, hold on. I said, "Unnecessary." I said, "I'm not going to read it on the weekend. Nobody's going to die if I don't have this report." Use your same language. I said, "And I'll likely get to it, given everything I have going on, sometime toward the latter part of Monday. Maybe not till Tuesday. So if you can get it to me by close of business Monday, that would be great." And she looked at me bewildered. This person had been at Chase for 15 years. She was like, I just can't even believe you're saying this to me. And I said, "Listen, there will be a time when I'm going to come to you and ask you for something that I'm going to need it on Saturday by noon. There's a level of urgency. Something has to happen. We're in the midst of a crisis. We're at a big bank. Something's going to happen. This is not one of those times." I said, "So I would like to keep those chips in the bank for when I really need it." She told that story to 60 people. And she said, "We are finally working for a human being." And it changed everything we did. And in one moment, there was a shift in the mindset, the culture, and their willingness to work extra hard, just like it went through the roof. But I still did that thing. Now, I did that on instinct, not from a book, not from, from behavior. It was just like, it just seemed instinctually right to do, not to have this person, it's 4:00 on Friday. She's going to grind all night long, run the data, pull it together Saturday morning, miss a kid's soccer game, or like, whoa. Don't need to do that. The reason I bring that story up is it's still happening. And I want for the listeners that are in leadership positions, be careful what you ask of your employees, because it is human nature for them to want to respond with urgency because they feel that urgency is what you're asking for. Be clear with, "Hey, I don't need this on the weekend. You don't need to work tonight, nor Saturday or Sunday. If you can prioritize this in the stuff you have gone, but most importantly, if something else you're going to do is going to drop off and you're going to disappoint somebody, let me know that too." And let your leader say, "Hey, I'm going to have to reprioritize some stuff. I'm going to get you what you need. Let me work with some of my colleagues to work this out." Like, be transparent about it. But unfortunately, Andrew, I still see, because now I'm on the other side of the desk, and I see how people are working inside of their companies, dealing with the bureaucracy, not saying anything when they know all the things we touched on, they're still happening in droves, mostly in publicly traded companies, because there's that 90-day life, working on the numbers, got to hit the number. We told it to the street. We got to make the number, boom, rinse, repeat, day 91.
Yeah. And that story, Vic, that was from before COVID, but instinctually you knew the right way to lead. That's why I don't think leadership has changed that much.
No.
The importance of doing it. Young people today, and by the way, it's not just young people, it's cascading up through the generations. They will not put up with the behaviors that at one time were tolerated. So, in organizations of value, this is stuff that really we shouldn't even have to teach, right? But now leadership's a little bit more complicated than just, simple things. I like to say leadership is more art than science.
Okay.
So somebody said to me the other day, "Are you afraid that AI is going to replace you?" I'm like, not really, because you can ask AI a question you would ask me, and you'll get the science, but you won't get the art.
That's right.
And leadership's more art than science. There's human beings who are incredibly complex, but I do believe that what you did with that employee. You said they told 60 people.
Yeah.
Now, had you done the opposite, they may have also told 60
No,
people.
they might have told 160
Yeah.
people.
And,
Yeah.
hell, Vic, when he asks you something, he's a slave driver. And so you get a reputation as a leader, and the reputation you have precedes you, right? So as leaders, we have to ask ourselves, honestly, what's the reputation that I have, and is it the one that I want to have going ahead of me? I believe that as leaders, we have a responsibility to lead through influence, not authority. John Maxwell said it best. He said, leadership is influence, right?
It's all influence.
And so somebody asked me the other day, said, well, how do I know how much influence I have? And I said, well, the great thing is when I get asked questions, in my realm, if I don't know the answer, I don't make one up. I usually go try to figure it out. And I came across this great way of measuring influence. How many people ask you for advice that don't have to? Like your employees have to. But how many people come to you and say, Vic, you mind if I just pick your brain for a minute? I got some questions for you. That's influence. That's somebody values your opinion. And by the way, when they do that, be careful, because they may not be asking for an answer. They may be asking for you to help them think it through. A lot of times,
isn't that coaching though?
That really is. Like people will say to me, "Oh, yeah, that was so helpful." I'm like, I did nothing. I just asked you questions.
I asked you questions and you had the answers.
Right. I help you frame the problem differently. So one of the things I would challenge your listeners to do is what happens when we have questions that we don't have the answers to is that we get busy with what we do know. That's what I was doing at Train. I knew there was things, I didn't know how to do them. I didn't know how to fix a particular problem. So I just got busy with what I did know. And I just ran myself ragged.
Boy, that's interesting.
So the question becomes what's the question I don't have the answer to? And there's one way to know for sure. What is frustrating me? What are the challenges I'm experiencing in my business, in my leadership, in my marriage, in my relationships? What are the problems I'm experiencing? And then, what knowledge would help me overcome that? What skill would help me overcome that? Now, when you figure out that question, get a pen and paper and write it down. Because if you don't, you're going to get busy with what you do know. One of my favorite interview questions is, what's the biggest challenge, frustration you're currently wrestling with? And the answer to that question tells you a lot about how people frame problems. And is it an external problem? Is it an internal problem that they're struggling with? When you have a question you don't have the answer to, that's where growth comes. Growth doesn't come from the answers we know. It comes from the answers we don't yet know.
Yeah. I was telling my son as he was transitioning from one job to the next, he was having a devil of a time. And even my daughter's now transitioning into being a small business owner. I said, this feeling you have right now? Pardon me. I said, you feel like a little weird inside. Maybe you're a little anxious. I said, you feel uncomfortable? Yeah. I said, embrace it.
Mm-hmm.
I said, when the day you realize that is a normal feeling when you're about to grow,
mm-hmm.
you'll want it.
Yeah.
You'll desire it.
Yeah.
Because you'll come out on the other side of it and go, I know more. I learned more. Maybe it was a mistake you'll never do again. Maybe it was a big win. Like there's something going to evolve from that. So embrace that discomfort that comes. And then if you can do that, I think people will retreat from, I'm going to just keep doing what I know. And the way you phrase it, nobody's put it to me exactly like that before, but it's so simple, which is where you started, taking things and communicating them very simply. That's one I'll reuse, Andrew. That's a good nugget. I got a couple of questions for you as we get into like a final thoughts round, if you don't mind. Is that okay?
Sure. Yeah.
What's the best leadership advice you have ever received?
Oh, yeah, it was painful. I've had some good mentors. Some of them were pretty brutal. I don't recommend the brutality approach to mentorship, but if someone's paying you, maybe sometimes you can get away with it. But anyway, somebody said to me one time that the amount of progress you make in your life will be directly proportional to the amount of honesty you can accept about yourself. He went on to say he didn't think I was particularly honest with myself.
Okay.
And I was like, what? And he's like, see? Because I immediately started to get defensive. Like I'm honest with myself. He's like, I'm telling you, you're not. Mm-hmm. And so, I was back when I was bringing Bob Proctor to town. You could actually go to the gate. So I was so jazzed that he was coming that I would actually drive to Atlanta Hartsfield Airport, get on the train, go to the gate, wait for him to get off the plane just so I could have more time with him. Right. Yeah. And so we were on the train and, he's like, I was telling him, I can't figure out how to, he said, you're going to have to learn how to charge more and work with more people. And I said, I can't do that. He said, I know. 18 months later, I called him and I said, I figured out how to charge more and work with more people. And he said, 18 months, Oxley. And I said, did you know how I needed to do it? He said, yeah, I know how to do it. I said, why didn't you tell me? He said, you wouldn't have believed me.
Wow.
So, having people in your life that will shine this flashlight on the thing that you need to learn. You can't always teach it to someone. I mean, you've got kids, Vic, you know that,
yeah,
right?
Sure.
Sometimes you have to learn things yourself.
That's
but
right.
We're so proud of our cuts and scrapes that we want to learn things all on our own. Yeah. And it's so much easier to learn from the experience of others. Rarely are we going somewhere that someone has not gone. And so if we can just find somebody, don't find somebody who's like talks a good game. So find somebody who's done it, who's worked with people, who's helped people, and work with them and let them help you get there faster. Because I guarantee they can.
Yeah, follow the playbook. As Tony Robbins says in a lot of his materials, success leaves clues.
It does.
And so you follow that playbook. I got a couple of questions here, but I want to get to just two more. We might have hit this, but let's repeat it again. What's one book you think every leader should read that's been in your arsenal?
Well, we talk about Think and Grow Rich and As a Man Thinketh, which are two great books. They're deep with human nature and the way the human mind works, right? So I think that those are great ones. I think the one that I would recommend that would be for people who are wanting to grow as leaders is Good to Great by Jim Collins. If you haven't read it, I would absolutely recommend it.
I was just I was putting a note here for myself to mention it to you in case we went down the road. I think what's great about that book, and I'm grinning ear to ear, is it applies to so many different things. It applies to how you focus on priorities. Mm-hmm. It applies to how you focus on yourself and your own personal growth. And it really helps you narrow your focus in on the most meaningful shifts you're going to make, whether it be sales, personal development, et cetera. Mm-hmm. That book's a home run. That's another one of those which I read periodically. I read it last year on vacation again. My wife's like, this book again? Like, what are you going to learn this time? I said, it's kind of like the Bible, honey. You just keep reading it and you get new stuff, depending on where you are in your life. So I'm not surprised you mentioned that. That is a great book.
Yeah, it really is.
In the 4 Faces of Frustration, where people have frustration and they become frustrated, is there anything that frustrates you?
Yeah. What frustrates me is that I would say it this way: the problems always look simple in the rearview mirror, right? So there's certain stages of my, like that 18 months where I spent trying to figure something out, and I'm like, what the hell took so long? Like, I am frustrated that it took me this long to figure some stuff out. And you just got to give yourself grace when that happens. But the thing that I've tried very hard, especially for the last 10 years, is to have new challenges every year. I don't think that what frustrates us and saps us of our energy and just frustrates us is problems. It's having the same problem over and over and over again. If the problem keeps coming back, it's because we haven't learned the lesson that the problem was there to teach us.
That's right.
So what frustrates me is when I see the problems repeating, I'm like, that means I'm not growing. That means I'm not learning. And that's on me.
That's a great one. 2 last questions. I see you wearing a Callaway golf shirt. What's
Yeah.
your handicap? Do you track a handicap?
I'm embarrassed to say what it is, Vic. I actually have 4 kids, and I didn't start playing golf till about probably 5 years ago. And I golf approximately 3 times a year, and it's all from March 18th to 21st on the same golf trip. So my handicap, I actually broke 100 for the first time.
Hey, you're in the 5%,
and I was very proud of that.
You should be.
Now the back 9 wasn't as good. So.
That's a good one. I've gone through phases of golf. I was at a point where I was about to abandon it because I was so obsessed with it and it was consuming me, and just sort of the inconsistency of my game was just baffling me. And then I went away for a couple of weeks ago, and I just got together with a friend and we played some golf. I brought my sticks with me. And I shot 47 on. We just played 9 holes one night, and I shot 47. I'm like, I'm on my way. The kid is back,
Yeah.
And so I'm a little bit more interested now. My son is an amazing golfer. He'll shoot in the 70s. My nephew's I've got a couple of nephews that are real studs. Really a lot of fun.
I have a good client of mine. I won't mention his names, but he was playing in a pro-am with a buddy of his, and there were 2 pros. And his buddy was just stinking it up. He was playing horrible. And they got about 5 holes in, and the pro pulls him aside and says, "Hey, do you mind if I give you some advice?" He said, "Gosh, I wish you would." Yeah. And he said, "You really suck at this game. You need to be easier on yourself."
Oh.
He's like, "You're not a pro."
Yeah.
Sometimes we forget that, most people play golf for the enjoyment.
Yeah.
And so are you enjoying it? Like when I go out and play golf, I'm just going out there to enjoy myself.
Same here.
I'll watch people getting upset, and I'm like, man, you're not even enjoying yourself.
It's bad.
Yeah. So just enjoy the moment. I think as high achievers, sometimes we get so focused on the destination and the thing we want to achieve, and we forget that the here and now is all we have. And there's no guarantee that there's any tomorrow.
Nope.
So no, I'm not saying we shouldn't plan and we shouldn't be goal setters and goal achievers, but Bob used to say to me, he said, "Never be satisfied, but always be happy."
Yeah.
Happy with where you are.
The past happened. You can't change it.
Right.
The future is uncertain. The only reality is this second. Right now, this is it. Make the most of it. One last thing is, how can people who are listening to this episode connect to you? And I'm going to take all your social links and your site and all that. Perfect. I'm going to post it behind, but I'd like to people hear it from your words.
Yeah. So LinkedIn is easy, right? Andrew Oxley. I'm sure you'll put that in there. Our website is transformingresults.com, which is, we didn't really get into this, but we don't really do traditional leadership development. We do business results connected to leadership development. But if they like what they heard, and we do a free 90-minute leadership workshop. It's live. We do them once a month. And if people want to be part of that, they can go to transformingresults.com, sign up for that. We will not pester you. We will not bother you. If you like what you hear and you want to know more after that, then absolutely let us know. But we found out a long time ago that if you overserve your clients and the people who are in your client mix, that you don't have to worry about where your customers are coming from. And I've been doing that now for 30 years.
Fantastic. Hey, congratulations on your success. I thoroughly enjoyed this time. I can't believe we've been at it an hour and 22 minutes. Feels like 5 minutes to me. And it's really because I'm a geek about these topics and I like people's perspective on them. Yeah, sure, there's some confirmation bias where I'm like, wow, yeah, that's exactly what I think. But there's a lot of pearls that I pulled out of this for myself. And I know the listeners are going to go, wow, that's really interesting. Just so you know, Andrew, when I'm recording these episodes, there's a little button here that says mark. And I typically mark spots so that when the shorts get edited, we've got a little I've got 13 marks. That's a record, by the way, in my podcast. So that's without listening to this, without letting AI go through it and tell me where the nuggets are. I've already got 13 pre-selected slot spots that I go, wow, there's really great stuff here. So I want to thank you for that. It was I really enjoyed this time. I will put all of your social links to your book, the whole 9 yards. For those listening, go grab that book and read the book. It was a super easy read. I really enjoyed it, and getting through the color scheme on the personality types and the behaviors behind them. And the explanation was very, very simple, very practical. Andrew, I can't thank you enough for coming on today. This episode will come out in a few weeks.
Well, Vic, it's been a pleasure chatting with you. I wish you all the best, and let's keep in touch.
Likewise. Take care.
Thank you.
Please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe.